I was standing in my empty kitchen, staring at the overdue notices spread across the counter, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. A medical office in Portland. My hands were shaking as I answered, not from fear but from rage. I thought it was another debt collector. Another bill my husband had hidden from me. Mrs. Johnson. This is Dr. Lisa Jones from Portland Neurology Associates. I'm calling about your husband, Miller. My breath caught. Is he okay? Did something happen? There was a pause. A heavy, awful pause that made my stomach drop. Mrs. Johnson, I need you to understand something. Your husband has been my patient for 18 months. I'm calling because, well, there's been a significant development in his case, and given what I've observed during his appointments, I felt ethically obligated to reach out to you directly. I gripped the counter. What are you talking about? What case? You don't know, she said softly. It wasn't a question. That phone call 3 months ago changed everything. But to understand why, you need to know how I got there. How a 62-year-old woman who'd spent 40 years building a life with a man she loved ended up drowning in debt, watching her marriage crumble, and discovering that everything she thought she knew was a lie. My name is Audrey Johnson, and until last year I thought I had it all figured out. Miller and I met when we were both 21, 2 kids working summer jobs at a state park in Vermont. He was the maintenance supervisor. I was running the visitor center. He had this way of making me laugh until my sides hurt, this goofy charm that cut through my usual shyness. We were married within 2 years, and by the time I was 25, we had our daughter Sophia. Life wasn't always easy. Miller worked construction, and I did bookkeeping for local businesses. Money was tight when Sophia was young, but we made it work. We were partners. We told each other everything. Or so I thought. When Sophia graduated from college and moved to Seattle for her graphic design job, Miller and I entered what should have been our golden years. We'd paid off the house in Eugene, Oregon, a modest 3-bedroom with a garden I'd lovingly maintained for decades. We had savings. We had plans. We were going to travel, maybe get a camper van and see the country. Then, about 2 years ago, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Miller became forgetful. He'd forget where he'd parked at the grocery store, or he'd tell me the same story twice in one evening. I chalked it up to age. We were both in our early 60s after all. But then came the mood swings. Miller had always been even-tempered, the calm to my occasional storm. But suddenly he was irritable, snapping at me over little things. Coffee was too weak. I'd folded his shirts wrong. I was asking too many questions. You're always on my case, Audrey, he'd say, his jaw tight. Can't you just let me breathe? I tried to be understanding. Maybe he was going through something. Male menopause, I'd heard that was a thing. So I gave him space. I stopped asking so many questions about his day. I tried to be supportive. That was my first mistake. The financial problems started about 14 months ago. I was paying bills one afternoon when I noticed our checking account was nearly empty. We'd had $12,000 in there at the beginning of the month. Now there was $800. My heart hammered as I logged into our online banking. There were withdrawals. Large ones. $2,000 here. $1,500 there. $800 at an ATM. When Miller came home that evening, I was waiting for him at the kitchen table. The bank statements printed out in front of me. Miller, we need to talk. He barely glanced at the papers. Not now, Audrey. I've had a long day. This can't wait. There's over $11,000 missing from our account. Where did it go? His face reddened. Missing. It's not missing. I used it. For what? For things we needed. For the truck repairs, for the new water heater, for. We didn't replace the water heater. And the truck repairs were only $600. Miller, what's going on? He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I'm sick of you questioning every damn thing I do. It's my money too. I worked for it. I stared at him, shocked. In 40 years of marriage, Miller had never thrown money in my face like that. We'd always treated our finances as shared, as ours. I'm not trying to fight with you, I said carefully. I'm just trying to understand. There's nothing to understand. Just drop it. He walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there with papers in my shaking hands. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to Miller snore beside me, wondering who this man was. This wasn't the partner I'd built a life with. This was someone else. Someone secretive. Someone defensive. Someone who was lying to me. Over the next few months, the withdrawals continued. Every time I checked our account, more money was gone. I started keeping a hidden log, documenting every suspicious transaction. When I tried to talk to Miller about it, he'd shut down. He'd get angry, accuse me of not trusting him, sometimes leave the house for hours. Once, he didn't come home until 2 in the morning. He smelled like cigarettes and alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out," he said. "I needed to clear my head. You drive me crazy with your constant nagging." Nagging. The word stung. I'd never nagged. I'd supported this man through job losses, through his father's death, through every crisis we'd faced. And now I was a nag because I dared to ask about our disappearing life savings. I started to suspect an affair. It was the only explanation that made sense. The money, the secrecy, the late nights, the irritability. Maybe there was another woman. Maybe he was planning to leave me. The thought made me physically ill. I did what any betrayed wife would do. I started investigating. I checked his phone when he was in the shower, but it was password protected now. He'd never had a password before. I looked through his truck, finding nothing but fast food wrappers and old receipts. I even drove by places he claimed to be. The hardware store, his friend Dave's house, but his truck was never there. One night I broke down and called Sophia. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked immediately, hearing the tremor in my voice. I told her everything. The money, the lies, Miller's strange behavior. There was a long silence. Then, "Mom, have you considered that maybe Dad is, I don't know, going through something? Like medically?" "What do you mean?" "The forgetfulness, the mood swings. Mom, those could be signs of something serious. Has he seen a doctor?" I hadn't even thought of that. "I don't know. He never tells me anything anymore. Maybe you should suggest it. Or talk to his doctor yourself." But when I tried to bring up the idea of a doctor's visit, Miller exploded. "There's nothing wrong with me," he shouted, his face inches from mine. "You want me to be sick, don't you? You want there to be something wrong so you can control me, watch my every move." I stepped back, frightened by the rage in his eyes. This wasn't Miller. This wasn't the man I'd married. "I'm just worried about you," I whispered. "Well, don't be. I'm fine. Just leave me alone." By month 9 of this nightmare, we'd lost over $40,000 from our savings accounts. I was watching our retirement evaporate before my eyes, and I had no idea where it was going. I started to get desperate. I called our bank, trying to see if they could help me understand the withdrawals, but without Miller's consent, they couldn't tell me anything. I considered hiring a private investigator but couldn't afford it, not with our money disappearing at this rate. Then came the day that nearly destroyed me completely. I came home from grocery shopping to find Miller in his office, the spare bedroom he'd claimed as his workspace. The door was usually locked now, but today it was cracked open. I could hear him on the phone. "I know, baby. I miss you too. Soon, I promise. Yeah, the money's all set. Just a little while longer and we can be together." My blood turned to ice. "Baby. The money's all set. We can be together." I stood in the hallway, groceries hanging from my numb hands, as my world shattered. He was leaving me. After 40 years, he was leaving me for someone else, and he was taking all our money with him. When he came out of the office, he found me standing there, tears streaming down my face. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been planning to leave me?" His expression shifted through confusion, then comprehension, then something that looked almost like panic. "Audrey, don't lie to me anymore. I heard you on the phone. Baby, we can be together." How long have you been having an affair? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Tell me. You're taking all our money, sneaking around, lying to me constantly. What else could it possibly be? He ran a hand through his graying hair, and for a moment, he looked tormented. Then his face hardened again. You wouldn't understand. Try me. No. Just stay out of my business, Audrey. I mean it. He grabbed his keys and left. I collapsed on the floor of the hallway, sobbing into the carpet we'd picked out together 20 years ago. That night I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I called a lawyer the next morning and asked about divorce proceedings. I started gathering financial documents, preparing to protect myself from whatever Miller was planning. I also did something I'm not proud of. I waited until Miller left the house. Then I picked the lock on his office door. I'd watched enough YouTube videos to figure it out with a bobby pin and 15 minutes of determination. Inside, his office looked normal at first. Desk, computer, filing cabinet. But when I opened the filing cabinet, my hands started shaking. Medical documents. Dozens of them. Prescriptions for medications I'd never heard of. Bills from doctors I didn't recognize. MRI reports. Neurology consultations. And there, at the bottom of the stack, was a diagnosis letter dated 18 months ago. Patient Miller Johnson, age 62, has been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease with accompanying behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia, BVFTD. Had to sit down. The room spun around me. Alzheimer's. Dementia. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Kept reading. The letter detailed personality changes, impaired judgment, disinhibition, apathy alternating with agitation. It recommended immediate intervention, family counseling, and discussion of care planning. 18 months ago. He'd known for 18 months and never told me. But this still didn't explain the money. It didn't explain the phone call I'd overheard. I dug deeper into the files, and that's when I found them. The receipts. Thousands of dollars to something called Peak Life Consulting. Monthly payments to a wellness coach named Terry Brandt. Charges to holistic health clinics, vitamin supplement companies, and something called the Renewal Center. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Peak Life Consulting had a slick website promising breakthrough treatments for Alzheimer's and dementia. Testimonials from desperate families claiming miraculous recoveries. Programs costing tens of thousands of dollars. My stomach sank. It was a scam. One of those predatory companies that targeted scared, vulnerable people with degenerative diseases, promising cures that didn't exist. Miller had been swindled. In his impaired state, frightened and confused by his diagnosis, he'd fallen for a con artist who'd convinced him there was hope, for a price. But that still didn't explain the baby comment I'd overheard. I confronted him that evening with the documents in my hand. I found these, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know about the Alzheimer's. I know about the scam company you've been giving our money to. His face went pale, then red. Then he lunged at me. You went through my things. You had no right. I had every right. You've been lying to me for over a year. You've been throwing away our retirement on some con artist promising a cure that doesn't exist. Terry's not a con artist. She's helping me. She says I can beat this if I just follow the program. Lying. Miller, these companies prey on people like you. There is no cure for Alzheimer's. I'm so sorry, but there isn't. And this woman has stolen $40,000 from us. He shoved past me, and I stumbled backward, catching myself on the doorframe. He'd never been physically aggressive with me before. Never. You don't understand anything, he snarled. I'm getting better. Can feel it. Terry says the treatment is working, that I just need to stay the course. But people like you, people who don't believe, you're toxic. You're holding me back. Miller, please. Let me help you. Let's go to a real doctor together. Let's talk to your neurologist. No. They just want to pump me full of drugs that don't work. Terry's approach is different. It's natural. It's bankrupting us. He grabbed his keys again. I'm going to see Terry. She actually listens to me. She actually cares. The door slammed behind him. I stood there shaking, finally understanding. Terry wasn't his lover, she was worse. She was a predator who'd found the perfect victim. A terrified man with a devastating diagnosis and impaired judgment, a man with access to life savings and no one watching over him. Had to stop this. I had to protect him, protect us before there was nothing left. The next morning I called Peak Life Consulting. A cheerful receptionist answered. I'd like to speak with Terry Brandt, I said. May I ask what this is regarding? My husband is a client of hers. Miller Johnson. I need to discuss his treatment plan. There was a pause. I'm sorry, but Ms. Brandt only communicates with her clients directly. It's part of our privacy policy. I'm his wife. I have a right to know what kind of treatment he's receiving, especially since we're paying for it. As I said, we can only discuss client matters with the client themselves. Would you like to schedule an appointment for yourself? We have some wonderful programs that might. Hung up. I spent that day researching Terry Brandt and Peak Life Consulting. What I found made me sick. There were complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. A lawsuit in California from a family whose father had given the company over $200,000 before dying of Alzheimer's 2 years after beginning treatment. Articles about how these companies used high-pressure sales tactics and pseudoscientific jargon to exploit vulnerable people. I printed everything and left it on the kitchen table for Miller to find. Maybe if he saw the evidence, he'd understand. When he came home that night, he took one look at the papers, swept them onto the floor, and screamed at me for 20 minutes straight. He called me unsupportive, controlling, a dream killer. He said I wanted him to die, that I'd given up on him, that he was ashamed to have married someone so close-minded. Then he told me he was moving out. I'm staying with Terry for a while, he said, throwing clothes into a duffel bag. Until you can get your attitude right. Until you can support me instead of tearing me down. Miller, please. You're not thinking clearly. The disease is affecting your judgment. There you go again. Treating me like I'm incompetent. I know exactly what I'm doing. For the first time in months, I feel like someone actually sees me, actually believes in me. And it's not you, Audrey. It's not you. He left. And he didn't come back. For 2 weeks, I barely heard from him. He'd text occasionally, brief messages saying he was fine, that he needed space. I tried calling, but he rarely answered. When he did, Terry was always in the background, and he'd cut the conversation short. I contacted his neurologist, Dr. Jones, explaining the situation. She was alarmed but explained that unless Miller was deemed legally incompetent, there was little anyone could do to force him into treatment or protect his finances. She said she'd been trying to contact him for months about follow-up appointments, but he'd stopped responding. Mrs. Johnson, I have to be honest with you, she said. The type of dementia your husband has, the behavioral variant, it affects the frontal lobe, which controls judgment, impulse control, and social behavior. Patients often become vulnerable to financial exploitation. They lose the ability to recognize when they're being taken advantage of. And unfortunately, they can become very defensive and paranoid, especially toward family members who try to help. So what do I do? Just watch him throw away everything we've worked for. Document everything. Keep records of his behavior, the financial transactions, his contact with his company. You may need to petition for conservatorship, which would give you legal authority to make decisions on his behalf. But that's a difficult process, and it requires proving he's incapable of managing his own affairs. Felt so helpless. The law was designed to protect people's autonomy, which was good in theory. But what about when someone's brain was literally betraying them? What about when autonomy meant self-destruction? I started the conservatorship process, gathering documents and scheduling a court date. But these things took time. Months, potentially. And in the meantime, our bank accounts were still bleeding money. Then I got the call that changed everything. Mrs. Johnson. This is Dr. Jones. My grip tightened on the phone. Is Miller okay? That's why I'm calling. Your husband came to see me yesterday. He was brought in by a woman who identified herself as his wellness coach. My jaw clenched. Terry. During the appointment, your husband's cognitive function had noticeably declined since I last saw him 6 months ago. But what happened after Miller left the room is what concerns me most, Mrs. Johnson. I held my breath. This woman, Terry, she lingered behind. She started asking questions that made my skin crawl. She wanted to know Miller's exact prognosis, how quickly the disease would progress, whether he was still legally competent to make financial decisions and sign documents. Then she asked about life expectancy and whether Miller had mentioned anything about updating his will or life insurance policies. My heart stopped. Mrs. Johnson, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. I know predatory behavior when I see it. This wasn't the concern of a caregiver or even a wellness coach. This was someone calculating. Someone measuring how much time she had left to extract what she could before your husband became too impaired to be useful. Oh my God. After they left, I did something I don't usually do. I looked into this woman's background. Terry Brandt isn't her real name. She's actually Teresa Brandywine, and she has a criminal history. Fraud. Exploitation of vulnerable adults. She served 3 years in prison in Nevada for systematically scamming elderly patients with dementia, convincing them to sign over assets while their families watched helplessly. The room started spinning. She's done this before, Audrey. Multiple times across several states. She identifies vulnerable people with cognitive impairments, positions herself as their savior, isolates them from family, and then bleeds them dry. And based on her questions yesterday, I believe she's now escalating her plans with Miller. What do you mean? Dr. Jones's voice lowered. The questions about life insurance, about his will, about how long he has left. Mrs. Johnson, I'm not trying to alarm you unnecessarily, but people who exploit vulnerable adults sometimes cross a line when they think they can get more from someone's death than from their continued exploitation. Combined with her criminal history and the fact that she's isolated Miller from you. She didn't need to finish. I understood what she was saying. What do I do? You need to act immediately. I'm willing to provide emergency testimony that Miller lacks capacity to manage his finances or make informed decisions. With my medical documentation and what you've gathered, we can petition for an emergency conservatorship today. But Mrs. Johnson, we need to move fast. If she's gotten him to sign documents, if she's been named in a will or as a beneficiary on policies, we may already be running out of time. I'll call my lawyer right now. Good. I'm texting you an address from Miller's patient file. It's where Terry listed as his current residence. But Audrey, please be careful. Don't go there alone. These situations can become dangerous when people like this feel cornered. The address was for a small apartment complex on the outskirts of Portland, about 40 minutes from our house. I made the drive with my daughter on speakerphone, Sophia having caught the first flight out from Seattle when I'd called her in tears. Mom, maybe you should wait for the police, she said. And tell them what? That my husband is staying with someone voluntarily. They can't do anything without evidence of a crime in progress. I need to see him. I need to get him out of there. Then wait for me. My flight lands in 2 hours. We can go together. But I couldn't wait. Every instinct I had was screaming that Miller was in danger. Real immediate danger. The apartment complex was run down, the kind of place with cracked parking lots and peeling paint. I found the unit number Dr. Jones had sent me and knocked. Terry answered the door. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a white smile that didn't reach her eyes. Can I help you? She asked pleasantly, blocking the doorway. I'm Audrey Johnson, Miller's wife. I need to see my husband. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. Assessment. Oh, Audrey. Miller has told me so much about you. Unfortunately, he's resting right now. He's had a difficult morning and asked not to be disturbed. I don't care. I need to see him. Now. I'm afraid I can't allow that. Miller is my client, and he's made it very clear that he needs space from you. Your presence causes him significant stress, which isn't good for his condition. As his wellness coach, I have a responsibility to protect his mental and emotional well-being. I felt rage building in my chest. This woman. This predator who'd wormed her way into my husband's confused mind, who'd stolen our life savings, who was now standing between me and the man I'd loved for 40 years. Get out of my way, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Or what? You'll call the police. Miller is here of his own free will. He's an adult capable of making his own choices. If you force your way in here, you'll be the one facing charges for trespassing and harassment, not me. I've documented everything. His desire for space from you, your aggressive behavior, your refusal to support his treatment. Who do you think they'll believe? She started to close the door, but I jammed my foot in it. Miller, I shouted past her. Miller, it's Audrey. Please, baby, I know you're confused, but you need to come home. This woman is lying to you. I heard movement inside. Then Miller appeared behind Terry, looking disheveled and disoriented. His eyes were unfocused, and he seemed thinner than he'd been just 2 weeks ago. Audrey, what are you doing here? I came to take you home. Miller, we need to talk. Please. I know you're scared about the Alzheimer's, but this woman isn't helping you. She's stealing from us. That's not true. Terry cut in smoothly, her hand moving to Miller's arm in a possessive gesture. Audrey, I understand you're upset, but I've been helping Miller explore alternative treatments. The traditional medical establishment has given up on him, declared him hopeless. But we haven't given up. The fact that you'd rather he just accept his diagnosis and wait to die. That's not what I'm saying. Miller, please. Just come home so we can talk. Just for 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. Miller looked between us. His face creased with confusion. In that moment I could see how lost he was, how frightened. This wasn't the strong man I'd married. This was someone adrift, drowning, grasping at anything that promised to save him. I don't know, he said slowly, his words slightly slurred. Terry says you want to put me in a home. That you want to take my money and lock me away. That's a lie. Miller, I would never. She's manipulating you right now, Terry interjected, her voice soothing. Can't you see it, Miller? The guilt trip, the demands, the way she's trying to control you. This is exactly what we talked about. This is the toxic pattern you needed to escape. His face clouded further, confusion giving way to something that looked like fear. Fear of me. Audrey, I think you should go. Miller, please. Go. His voice rose, cracking. Just leave me alone. You're making everything worse. Terry gave me a triumphant smile as she gently guided Miller back into the apartment. I think it's time for you to leave, Mrs. Johnson. Before I call the police myself. The door closed in my face. I stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down my cheeks, my whole body shaking with rage and helplessness. Then I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. We need that emergency conservatorship, I said, my voice trembling. Today. Right now. Whatever it takes. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't discover until the police investigation later, was what had been happening inside that apartment. According to the evidence they eventually uncovered, Terry had been systematically working on Miller for weeks, exploiting his impaired judgment to convince him to sign documents. It started small. Consent forms for treatments, payment agreements, liability waivers. But gradually, she'd introduced more serious paperwork. A new will, naming her as executor and primary beneficiary. A power of attorney, giving her complete control of his finances. A life insurance policy for $500,000, with her listed as the sole beneficiary. Beneficiary changes on his existing retirement accounts. Miller, in his deteriorating cognitive state, had signed them all. He trusted her completely. She was saving his life. She was the only one who believed in him, who hadn't given up on him. But there was one document she desperately needed. The deed to our house. Miller, we need to talk about protecting your assets. she told him that very morning before Dr. Jones's appointment. Your wife could sell the house out from under you at any time. You've seen how angry she is, how controlling. Women like that, when they feel they're losing control, they lash out. They take everything. Miller had looked uncertain. Even through the fog of his disease and the medications she'd been secretly giving him, some part of him understood that the house was significant. That's where Audrey and I live, he'd said slowly. Where we raised Sophia. I know, honey. No. But Audrey isn't the woman you married anymore. You've told me that yourself. She's changed. She's angry all the time. She doesn't support you. And legally, she can do whatever she wants with that house. Unless you protect it. How? Sign it over to me temporarily. Just for safekeeping. That way, when you're better, and you will get better, Miller, I promise you that, you can decide what you want to do with it. But at least it'll be safe from Audrey's spite. At least she can't take your home away from you. Miller had stared at the deed transfer papers for a long time. His hand had trembled as he picked up the pen. I don't know, he'd whispered. This feels. Feels what? Terry had leaned closer, her voice honey-sweet. Feels like you're finally taking control of your own life. Feels like you're standing up to someone who's been controlling you for 40 years. That's called empowerment, Miller. That's called freedom. But before he could sign, Dr. Jones's office had called to confirm his appointment. Terry had insisted they go immediately, hoping the doctor would provide more ammunition she could use to convince Miller to complete the paperwork. That decision, pushing for the doctor's visit, turned out to be her fatal mistake. That night, Sophia arrived from Seattle. Together, we met with my lawyer and Dr. Jones. With the doctor's testimony about Miller's clear incapacity, the evidence of financial exploitation I'd gathered, and the information Dr. Jones had discovered about Teresa Brandywine's criminal history, we were granted an emergency temporary conservatorship within hours. I was given legal authority to make decisions for Miller and immediate power to freeze all financial accounts and prevent any further transactions. The first thing I did was lock down everything. Every bank account, every credit card, every investment account. I contacted the life insurance company and flagged the recent policy change. I called our homeowners insurance and mortgage company and put alerts on our property. Then I filed a detailed police report providing everything. Dr. Jones's statement, Teresa Brandywine's criminal history, the financial records showing the exploitation, everything. The next morning at 9 o'clock, I returned to that apartment. This time I brought Sophia, my lawyer, and 2 police officers. Terry answered the door with that same pleasant smile, but it cracked when she saw the uniforms. We have a court order granting Mrs. Johnson emergency conservatorship over Miller Johnson, my lawyer said, handing her the papers. She has legal authority to make medical, residential, and financial decisions on his behalf. We're here to transport Mr. Johnson home. Terry's mask shattered. Her face twisted with rage. You can't do this. Miller doesn't want to go with her. He's my client. He's made his choices. Actually, ma'am, the court has determined that Mr. Johnson lacks the capacity to make those choices, one of the officers said calmly. Please step aside. This is kidnapping. I'll sue all of you. Miller, tell them. Tell them you want to stay here with me. Miller appeared behind her, looking confused and frightened. What's happening? Terry, what's going on? These people are trying to take you away from me, baby, Terry said, her voice breaking. Your wife is trying to control you again. But you don't have to go. You're a grown man. You can make your own. Mr. Johnson, my lawyer interrupted. I'm David Chen, an attorney. Your wife has been granted legal conservatorship because medical professionals have determined you're not currently able to make fully informed decisions due to your medical condition. This isn't a punishment. It's protection. We're taking you home where you'll receive proper medical care. Miller looked at me, and for just a moment I saw clarity in his eyes. Recognition. Fear. Confusion. Audrey. I'm here, baby, I said, stepping forward. I'm taking you home. Everything's going to be okay. I'm so confused, Terry said. But I don't understand what's happening. I know you don't. That's okay. I understand for both of us right now. Terry made one last desperate attempt, grabbing Miller's arm. Don't let them do this. Miller, if you go with her, you'll never get better. The treatment was working. Just a few more weeks and... Ma'am, remove your hand from Mr. Johnson, or you'll be arrested for interference, the officer said, his hand moving to his belt. Terry released Miller but turned on me with pure venom in her eyes. You're going to regret this. I have legal documents. Miller signed them willingly. I'll fight you in court and I'll win. That man wanted me to have. Actually, Miss Brandywine, the officer said, and Terry's eyes widened at the use of her real name. Or should I call you Teresa? You're going to need to come down to the station with us. We have some questions about your business practices and your relationship with Mr. Johnson. I don't have to answer anything without my lawyer. That's your right. But you'll want to come voluntarily now rather than wait for the warrant that's being processed. Terry's face went pale. As we guided Miller to the car, he kept looking back at the apartment, at Terry, confusion written all over his face. I don't understand. Terry was helping me. Wasn't she? Audrey, was she helping me? No, baby, I said gently, my heart breaking. She wasn't. But we'll talk about it later. Let's just get you home. The investigation into Teresa Brandywine moved with surprising speed once the police started digging. With access to Miller's financial records, I provided them with documentation of every payment he'd made to her and Peak Life Consulting. $47,320 over 14 months. When they executed a search warrant on her apartment, what they found was damning. Draft documents that Miller hadn't yet signed, including the deed transfer for our house. A small amber prescription bottle hidden in her bathroom cabinet, containing crushed benzodiazepines that weren't prescribed to anyone in the residence. Detailed notes about Miller's condition, tracking his cognitive decline week by week, with notations like increased confusion, optimal time frame narrowing and subject. Highly suggestible, memory fragmentation accelerating. And perhaps most chilling, 5 other files. 5 other victims, all elderly or suffering from cognitive decline, all being systematically drained through fraudulent wellness programs. The total theft exceeded $340,000. But what made the detectives' blood run cold was what they found on Teresa's laptop. Timeline. A detailed, methodical timeline tracking Miller's deterioration with clinical precision. Notes like Week 8, subject showing increased dependency, and Week 15, subject's wife becoming suspicious, increase isolation protocols. And then there were the searches. Browser history showing queries about how fast does Alzheimer's progress naturally? Medications that cause confusion in elderly, legal competency requirements by state, life insurance payout timelines, symptoms of accidental benzodiazepine overdose, natural death versus suspicious death investigation triggers. The detective who showed me the evidence had to leave the room while I processed what I was seeing. This woman hadn't just been stealing from Miller. She'd been studying how to make him deteriorate faster, how to keep him confused and compliant, and, the evidence strongly suggested, how to eventually make his death look like a natural progression of his disease. Mrs. Johnson, the detective said when he returned, I need you to understand something. Based on what we've found, we believe your husband was in immediate danger. Not just financially but physically. The benzodiazepines we found. They weren't for anxiety. Mixed with Alzheimer's medications, they can cause severe confusion, respiratory depression, even death if dosed improperly. And someone with her knowledge could easily make it look accidental. I felt the room tilt. She was poisoning him. We believe she was giving him sedatives without his knowledge to worsen his symptoms and make him more manageable. But Mrs. Johnson, look at this timeline. He pointed to her notes. 3 weeks from now, she'd written optimal extraction point, begin exit strategy. We think she was planning to either get those final documents signed and disappear, or, he paused, or ensure she inherited everything and make it look like his condition had simply progressed. The life insurance policy she'd convinced Miller to take out was for $500,000, with Teresa as the sole beneficiary. Combined with the house value of over $400,000, she would have walked away with nearly $1 million. And Miller would have been dead. The toxicology report on Miller confirmed what the police suspected. His system showed levels of benzodiazepines that he'd never been prescribed. Dr. Jones explained that these drugs, especially in someone with dementia, could cause severe cognitive impairment, confusion, loss of motor control, and respiratory issues. She was essentially drugging him to make him more confused and dependent, Dr. Jones told me during one of our follow-up appointments. The good news is that now that he's home and those drugs are out of his system, you should see some improvement. Not a cure. The Alzheimer's is real and progressive, but he won't have that additional layer of drug-induced fog. She was right. Within 2 weeks of being home, Miller showed noticeable improvement. He was still confused, still had memory problems, but he was more present than he'd been in months. The angry, paranoid man who'd left me was gradually fading, revealing glimpses of the person I'd married. One morning, about 3 weeks after bringing him home, Miller woke up with unusual clarity. He looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Audrey, I need to tell you something while I can still remember it." I set down my coffee cup, my heart already aching for whatever was coming. I remember her now. Teresa. Whatever her real name is. His eyes filled with tears. And I remember what I did. The money. The things I said to you. Leaving you. And I'm so sorry. Miller, you weren't in your right mind. The disease, the drugs she was giving you. I know. But somewhere in here. He tapped his temple. I knew something was wrong. There were moments when I'd think, this doesn't feel right. Or, why is Audrey so upset? But then Terry would say something or I'd feel so foggy and confused and I just believe her. Because believing her was easier than accepting that I was sick. That I was dying. You're not dying. Not yet. We have time. Do we? He reached across the table and took my hand. Audrey, I need you to know. Even when I couldn't remember your name, even when I didn't recognize your face, some part of me always knew you were important. You were home. And I'm sorry I forgot that. I'm sorry I let that woman make me forget. We both cried that morning. And then we sat together, holding hands, treasuring the clarity of that moment because we both knew it wouldn't last. Teresa Brandywine's trial began 6 months later. By then, the investigation had expanded far beyond just Miller's case. The FBI had uncovered an entire network of con artists who specialized in exploiting people with dementia and Alzheimer's. They operated through seemingly legitimate wellness companies, targeting vulnerable individuals through support groups, medical offices they'd infiltrated, even obituaries of people who died from cognitive diseases, figuring family members might also be at risk. They had a shared database. A list of potential victims gathered from hacked medical records, support group registries, and Alzheimer's Association mailing lists. They traded information about which victims were most vulnerable, which families were paying attention, which jurisdictions had weaker enforcement. Teresa had been one of their most prolific members. Over her career, she'd exploited at least 12 people across 5 states, stealing an estimated $1.2 million. But Miller's case was the first where evidence showed she'd crossed the line from theft to attempted murder. The prosecution was devastating. They presented the timeline, the searches, the drugs, the life insurance policy, the forged documents. They brought in Dr. Jones to testify about Teresa's questions regarding Miller's life expectancy. They presented testimony from Teresa's previous victims and their families. And they brought in Miller himself. I wasn't sure he'd be able to testify. His good days were becoming rarer, and the stress of a courtroom could disorient him completely. But the prosecutor said his testimony, even fragmented, would be powerful. The day Miller took the stand, I sat in the front row with Sophia, holding my breath. The prosecutor asked him gently, "Mr. Johnson, do you remember a woman named Terry Brandt?" Miller looked confused for a moment, his eyes scanning the courtroom. Then they landed on Teresa, sitting at the defense table, and something shifted in his expression. Fear. Recognition. She said she could fix me, he said softly. She said I didn't have to be sick. Did you believe her? Yes. God help me, yes. I was so scared. The doctor said there was no cure, that I was just going to get worse and worse until I didn't even remember my own name. And then this woman came along and said, I can help you. I can save you. What person wouldn't want to believe that? Did she ask you for money? Miller nodded. A lot of money. She said the treatments were expensive but worth it. She showed me testimonials from people who'd gotten better. I thought I could beat it. I thought I could spare my wife from having to watch me disappear. Mr. Johnson, did you know that Terry Brandt was actually Teresa Brandywine, a convicted felon with a history of fraud? No. I didn't know anything. He seemed so kind, so understanding. She listened to me when I was scared. She made me feel like I wasn't helpless. His voice broke. I trusted her. And she took everything. Not just my money, she took my time. Time I should have spent with my wife, with my daughter. Time I can't get back. And now I can't even remember most of it. The defense attorney tried to cross-examine, suggesting Miller's testimony was unreliable due to his condition. But that backfired spectacularly. You're right, Miller said, looking directly at Teresa. I can't remember everything. My brain is broken. Which is exactly why what she did was so evil. She knew I was broken and she used it against me. She didn't see a sick person who needed help. She saw a bank account with a confused security system. The courtroom was silent. Teresa showed no emotion throughout the entire trial. No remorse, no shame, no humanity. When she was convicted on all counts, elder exploitation, fraud, theft, attempted murder, conspiracy, and racketeering, she simply stared straight ahead. The judge sentenced her to 22 years in federal prison. Ms. Brandywine, the judge said, you are a predator of the worst kind. You don't target the strong or the capable. You target the frightened, the confused, the medically vulnerable. You exploited Mr. Johnson's deteriorating condition not just to steal his money, but with apparent intent to hasten his death for financial gain. You are a danger to society's most vulnerable members, and this court will ensure you cannot harm anyone else for a very long time. As they led Teresa away in handcuffs, she finally looked back at us. At Miller, who sat slumped in his wheelchair, exhausted from testifying. At me, sitting beside him with my hand on his shoulder. She smiled. It was brief, barely a flicker, but I saw it. A cold, calculated smile that said even now, even caught and convicted, she felt no remorse. To her, this was just a business deal that hadn't worked out. I wanted to feel satisfaction at her conviction. Instead, I just felt tired. The 17 other members of Teresa's network were also prosecuted. The FBI's investigation revealed the scope of their operation. Over $3.2 million stolen from vulnerable adults across 7 states, potentially dozens more victims they'd never be able to identify. Some of the perpetrators took plea deals. Others went to trial and were convicted. Sentences ranged from 3 to 18 years. The investigation also led to reforms. Several states passed new laws requiring background checks for home health workers and wellness coaches. Support groups and medical offices implemented new privacy protections. The FBI created a task force specifically dedicated to investigating exploitation of people with cognitive impairments. Miller's case became the foundation for much of this work. The prosecutor called us heroes for coming forward, for fighting back, for exposing the network. But sitting here now, watching Miller struggle to remember how to tie his shoes, I don't feel like a hero. I feel like someone who almost lost everything and got lucky enough to have a doctor who cared and a moment of clarity that led to action. We were lucky. So many others aren't. It's been over a year now since that phone call from Dr. Jones changed everything. Miller is still with me, though he's not the same man I married. The Alzheimer's is progressing, slower than it was when Teresa was drugging him, but progressing nonetheless. We have good days and bad days. On good days, he helps Sophia with her graphic design work, offering artistic insights that show flashes of the person he used to be. He tends his small garden plot, though he often forgets what he planted. He holds my hand while we watch old movies, sometimes remembering we've seen them before, sometimes experiencing them as if for the first time. On bad days he doesn't know who I am. He asks for his mother who died 30 years ago. He tries to leave the house because he thinks he needs to get to a job he retired from a decade ago. He gets frustrated and angry when nothing makes sense, when his brain won't cooperate, when the world feels foreign and frightening. Those days break my heart over and over again. But we're managing. Sophia lives here now permanently, working remotely and helping with care. We've hired a part-time aide for the afternoons when both Sophia and I need breaks. We've connected with support groups, both for Miller and for us as caregivers. We've also started speaking publicly about what happened. I've testified before the state legislature. I've spoken at conferences about elder abuse. I've been interviewed by journalists investigating similar cases. Miller, on his better days, has recorded videos warning others about the dangers of miracle cures and predatory wellness coaches. If our story can save even one person from what we went through, it's worth the pain of reliving it. Last week, we had one of those perfect, heartbreaking moments that define life with Alzheimer's. We were looking through old photo albums, something we do regularly now, trying to reinforce memories while we still can. Miller pointed to a picture from our wedding day. We're standing in front of the courthouse in Vermont, both of us looking impossibly young, grinning at the camera. "That's us," he said softly. "Yes, baby. That's us. We got married that day. 42 years ago." He studied the photo for a long time. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I don't remember that day anymore," he whispered. "I know it happened. Can see it right here. But I can't remember what it felt like. I can't remember what you said or what I said or what we were thinking. It's just gone." My own tears started falling. "That's okay. I remember for both of us. Tell me." So I told him about how nervous he was that morning, how he'd forgotten his tie and had to borrow one from the justice of the peace, about how I'd worn my mother's dress, altered to fit, about how we'd said our vows with shaking voices and then laughed with relief when it was done, about how we'd gone to a diner afterward and shared a piece of apple pie because it was all we could afford. He listened, hanging on every word, as if I were telling him a story about strangers instead of our own lives. "That sounds nice," he said when I finished. "I wish I could remember it." "Me too, baby. Me too." He looked at the photo again. "But I'm glad you were there. Even if I can't remember it, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I married you. I'm glad too. Audrey." "Yes. Even on the days when I don't know who you are, I think some part of me still knows you're important, that you're safe, that you're home." I held him while we both cried, mourning what was lost and treasuring what remained. "I want you to understand something. I'm sharing this story not for sympathy, not for praise, but because what happened to us is happening to families everywhere. Right now, somewhere, there's a Teresa Brandywine targeting someone's confused parent or spouse. There's a network of predators sharing lists of vulnerable people. There's a family watching money disappear and not knowing why. There's a person with a devastating diagnosis being told by a con artist that hope exists, for a price. These predators rely on shame and isolation. They count on families not talking about what's happening, not seeking help, not fighting back. They count on the legal system protecting autonomy even when someone's brain is betraying them. So I'm talking about it. I'm fighting back. I'm breaking that pattern of silence. And I need you to do the same. If someone you love is showing warning signs, personality changes, memory problems, poor judgment, disappearing money, act immediately. Don't wait. Don't assume you're overreacting. Trust your instincts. If someone has been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, be vigilant about who enters their life. Question everyone. Verify everything. Protect their finances proactively, before there's a crisis. If you suspect exploitation, document everything. Keep records of financial transactions, behavioral changes, interactions with suspicious individuals. You'll need this evidence to get legal protection. Use the legal tools available. Powers of attorney, conservatorship, adult protective services. These exist to help. Yes, the process is difficult and time-consuming. Do it anyway. Connect with medical professionals and make them your allies. Doctors, nurses, social workers, they see these patterns. They can provide the medical documentation you need to protect your loved one. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And most importantly, don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting someone who can't protect themselves. You're not taking away their autonomy. You're preventing someone else from stealing it. Miller is napping now in his favorite chair by the window. The afternoon sun is illuminating his face, highlighting the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes. He looks peaceful. Sophia is in the kitchen making dinner, humming along to music only she can hear through her earbuds. The house smells like garlic and tomatoes. She's making Miller's favorite pasta dish, though he might not remember it's his favorite. This is our life now. Not the one we planned. Not the retirement of travel and adventure we dreamed about. But it's our life, and we're living it together. Some people have asked me if I regret fighting so hard. If I regret the legal battles, the emotional toll, the money spent on lawyers instead of care. If I ever think maybe it would have been easier to just let Miller go, to start over, to protect myself instead of him. The answer is no. Never. Not once. Because love isn't about the easy times. It's about the impossible ones. It's about choosing each other when every instinct says to run. It's about fighting for someone even when they're fighting against you. It's about showing up every single day, even when the person you're showing up for doesn't remember you did the same thing yesterday. That's what the vow, in sickness and in health, actually means. Not just supporting someone through a cold or a broken leg, but standing beside them when their brain is betraying them, when they're vulnerable to predators, when the disease makes them unrecognizable. Miller didn't choose to get Alzheimer's. He didn't choose to become vulnerable to someone like Teresa Brandywine. But I can choose how I respond. I can choose to protect him, to fight for him, to love him even when he can't always love me back. And I choose him. Every single day I choose him. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. I know it was long. I know it was difficult. I know there were moments that were painful to hear. But these stories need to be told. They need to be shared. Because somewhere, right now, someone is going through something similar and feeling desperately alone. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Post it where it might reach someone who needs it. You never know whose life you might change. Leave a comment and tell me your experience. Have you dealt with cognitive decline in a loved one? Have you encountered financial exploitation or predatory caregivers? Have you had to make impossible choices? Your story matters. Your voice matters. And sharing it might help someone else feel less alone. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. I'll continue sharing real stories about survival, resilience, family, and the complicated reality of loving people through their darkest moments. These aren't fairy tales with neat endings. They're real experiences from real people navigating impossible situations. And if you recognize warning signs in your own life or someone you love, please act. Don't wait. Don't second-guess yourself. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, seek help, and fight back. The life you save might be theirs. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Ask hard questions. Trust your instincts. And remember, loving someone through impossible circumstances doesn't make you a hero. Just makes you human. Until next time.